name's Elisa. I'm the events coordinator here at Politics Prose Bookstore, where we now host in-person and virtual events, along with partnered events, trips, and classes. For a full list of everything that we have confirmed, please visit our website, politics-prose.com. Before we get started today, I would like to ask you to please silence your cell phones just to avoid any disruptions during our event today. And then when we get time for the Q&A at the end of the event, I'll be passing around this handheld microphone just to make sure that we can hear your questions up at the front of the room and on the recording of tonight's event. So just raise your hand and we'll hand it out. Once the event is complete, we ask that you please fold up your chairs and lean it against something sturdy. That wall over there works perfectly fine, just to help us, wrap up a bit. So now, without further ado, tonight I'm very excited to welcome Andrew Bertaina, Jenn Koiter, and Dan Brady, discussing their titles, One Person Away From You, So Much of Everything, and Subtexts. Andrew Bertaina's short story collection, One Person Away From You, won the Moon City Press Fiction Award. His work has appeared in the Threepenny Review, Witness Magazine, The Normal School, Open Bar at Tin House, and The Best American Poetry. He has an MFA from American University in Washington, D.C. And his work is available at andrewbertaina.com. Jenn Koiter is a writer, breath worker, and creativity and writing coach. Her debut poetry collection is So Much of Everything. Her poems and essays have appeared in Barrelhouse, Smartish Pace, The Shore, For Happened, One Art, Ruminate, Copper Nickel, and other journals. She lives in Washington, D.C., and you can find her at literary events around town or on Twitter and Instagram as @Jenn Koiter. Dan Brady is the author of the poetry collection Strange Children, Subtexts, and Songs in E minor. Winner of the Barclay Prize for Poetry, forthcoming from Trnsfr Books, along with 2 poetry chapbooks. He is the longtime poetry editor of Barrelhouse, a literary magazine and small press based here in DC. Our authors will be joined in conversation today with founders and co-directors of the Inner Loop, Courtney Sexton and Rachel Kuntz. So please join me in welcoming to Politics Prose, Andrew Bertaina, Jenn Koiter, Dan Brady, Courtney Sexton, and Rachel Kuntz.
Hey everyone, it's wonderful to be here. It's so good to be here with the 3 of you. It's been a great past year and a half now of having authors in our corner, and we're thrilled to be doing this event in partnership with Politics Prose. I'm going to tell you all a little bit about the Inner Loop for those of you who don't know us. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization here in DC. We support the literary arts. We were founded in 2014, which we can't believe because we're moving toward 10 years, if we make it. And essentially, our work is driven by a love for writing, a love for writers, and a love for community. Our goal is to create spaces and platforms for local writers in our region to find each other and for the people living in our region to find them. To our Cornerstone program, a monthly reading series, we do this regularly, and then of course we have one-off other programming and one-off opportunities such as this to engage with the community. And with that, I'll let Rach tell you a little bit about the Author's Corner program.
So for those of you, there we go. For those of you who have heard me do the spiel 1,000 times, I apologize. But the Author's Corner program is a physical and digital marketing campaign for up-and-coming authors in the DC area. The goal is to give them a leg up in the competitive business of selling your art. We have been doing it since 2021. This is our 2nd season, and I can't think of a better way for us to wrap up the season than to bring some of those authors together for this panel. Some of the things that we do for those authors is feature them at our monthly reading, on our podcast, our YouTube channel. We pay for Facebook ads to sell their book, and we have a physical corner in Potter's House Books to sell those books as well. We also have the Eat, Drink, Read program where we put inserts in takeout menus and takeout boxes at local restaurants, and that features an excerpt from the book in their bio just to get the word out about the authors. and connect, again, the DC community with the local authors. So again, we're super excited to finish off the season with this cool panel at Politics Prose.
I think that's probably,
That's enough.
well, yeah, we'll probably jump in here and hear from the people who you actually came to listen to. Hold on, right, so I get my papers sorted here. Okay, so we're gonna start by asking you to tell us a little bit about your story, help the audience get to know you, give a quick summary of your journey as writers. And Dan, I'm gonna kick it off with you, put you on the spot first. You wrote so wonderfully about DC as a transient city in your Washington Independent Review of Books post. And you said that you always knew you'd stay here, even when many of your friends and colleagues at Barrelhouse had left. Why were you so sure DC was the right place for you?
Can you guys hear me okay through this mic? Yeah, okay. So I moved down here in 2004 and pretty immediately was able to get connected to the literary community. And I think that's part of what I fell in love with, that there are so many options, there's so many people doing different things. You can find the place where you fit in, but also explore all these other communities and really get exposed to interesting work. I also just feel like DC itself has a nice mix of high and more disruptive culture. You can go to the Smithsonian or the Folger Shakespeare Library, but then you can go see some weird art installation in a garage somewhere. So, and it's all accessible. It's all like right there for the taking, and I really love that. And I continue. I don't think I'll ever get bored of it. So.
Jenn and Andrew, you both wrote in your articles about not writing and your journey back to writing in the DMV. So Jenn, I'm going to start with you. If you could just tell us a little bit more about your journey and how it relates to DC.
Sure. Thank you. I had writer's block for a good 5 years after my MFA, and I disconnected from my literary community. I was basically a lapsed poet, and
Aren't we all?
and what brought me back to start writing again actually was screenwriting. Like I completely shifted genres and started writing for the screen. And the second thing that happened was that a friend of mine was connected with a local organization called Day 8, and they were having an open mic, and she was the featured reader, and so I went to support her and started reading some of the poems that had been coming up through the cracks between the screenplays, as they do, and ultimately went on to win their book prize, the DC Poet Project. And that would never have happened if I hadn't been here. I would probably still be thoroughly disconnected from literary community, from other writers, and from my own writing, if it weren't for being in DC. So it's a special place in my heart.
Well, welcome back to the community. You're always welcome back. Andrew, do you want to tell us about your experience?
Yeah, so I came here to get an MFA in creative writing, so kind of like typical in ways path. But within a year, concluded you can't actually make a living as an artist. So I was like, well, what am I gonna do? So I kept writing, but then kind of bounced away from it. Had a couple of children and was taking care of them, and they were just kind of feeling pulled in different directions. And I will say that even though I lost track of most of my MFA, I went to, I don't know, a bar for a reading or something, and ran into a friend who had out of the program. She was like, hey, like, you should just keep writing. And like, there's this thing called flash fiction. And like, if you have kids, you can crank it out. It's like 800 words, right? Like, I was like, okay, maybe this is the way that I can get into it. And so, yeah, so I went back and wrote, I don't know, like 2 or 3 pieces that I had on my computer, and then, started kind of sending out writing again. But it was definitely, I was definitely being connected and just, showing up for this random reading. Because I had, I just kind of distanced myself from writing and was like, well, I don't know, maybe next time around, you know? Yeah, so I do appreciate the community here in DC. Yeah.
It was an interlude reading, wasn't it? No, I'm
Yes,
sorry.
it was definitely an interlude reading. I would not be here if not for the interlude, it's fair to say.
Oh, that's so nice to hear. Yeah, the interlude is definitely like help coordinating between the writing deserts. And you know what they say, not writing is writing. So. I just want to pivot to the small press aspect of your journeys. The three of you have all published with an independent, smaller press. So I just wanted to talk about how you made that choice and what that experience was like. So Dan, I'll start with you. Your collection, it's an unconventional take on erasure poetry, and it's very visual and different and exciting. And I just wonder how that affected your sort of shopping it around, and did you decide that it should fit with an indie press, or did the indie press find you?
Yeah, I knew it wasn't going to be a book that like Norton was going to put too weird. But, you know, I tried to send it out to lots of small presses and university presses, and nobody was interested. So then my first book came out in 2018 from Publishing Genius Press. And it was a great working relationship. It was very collaborative, and Adam really liked my stuff, and I liked working with him. So a couple months after that book came out, I was like, so I have this other thing that maybe you'd like, I don't know. I knew that whoever designed this book was gonna have it rough, because it's kind of like an open field, words all over the page sort of thing. And he was like, yeah, no, I like this, I can do this. So I think having that relationship built up already, and I had known Adam a little bit, he was living in Baltimore for a long time. So having that kind of understanding of each other's aesthetic was really helpful in getting a difficult book out into the world.
Why was your book difficult, Dan?
Well, I really encourage anyone who is interested to pick it up and look, because it's sort of like...
He's like, have you seen it?
Okay. The poems are sort of an attempt at a three-dimensional poem. There are multiple levels of erasure, so each page is the same words in the same place on the page, but different pieces are taken away to create new poems and stories on each page, which is crazy. Don't do that. I think the end product's pretty cool, so you know, check it out. But yeah, it's not something that like just anybody is gonna publish.
Awesome, thank you. Jen, I'm gonna pick on you next, if you don't mind. Your collection is also unique in different ways, but it pulls many disparate storylines together. I think we move from like pinup girl to deep personal tragedy, all in the course of this short collection. And at the end of the day, it's ultimately about reckoning. I think that was something I took away from it. But how did this all look to prospective publishers, and what were the selling points you used to say, like, there are through lines here?
Well, at first I chopped it up into chapbooks, and actually one of them did wind up getting accepted, but then I withdrew it, and so I just had never published them. And the book was written over such a long period of time, right? It was maybe 10 years. But at the same time, I was still the one doing the writing. So I feel that was like, I'm the through line, right? Like it's like the story of the knife that's 900 years old, and they've changed the handle a few times and the blade a few times, but it's still the same knife. I feel like that's this collection. And honestly, the way that I won the prize I won was through giving readings, right? So I had just a bunch of poems. I didn't even know how many I had, and I had a month to pull my collection together. After they were like, like, okay, yeah, you're good, we'll publish you. And then
That's how it always works.
That's
Whatever you want, we'll publish it.
And I honestly think I wouldn't have a book otherwise. Like, I don't think I would have gone through that process of iterating manuscripts. I'm pretty significant ADHD, and I needed to do it in one big rush. And I did, so it's a unique story.
Yeah, so I'm interested in that. You said it was separate chapbooks. How did you decide to pull everything together? I feel like it's a bold choice to say, I'm the through line, I'm gonna put all of these poems together, and it makes sense. It's not just gonna make sense to me, it makes sense to the audience. How did you get there?
I think, well, for one thing, there are a lot of recurring themes in my writing. Like, okay, this'll sell it, grief. So I feel like, and also just the experience of being a woman, that's a big one. Navigating the world as a woman. And so I really, yeah, it's at once it's kind of a crazy quilt, but on the other hand, it hangs together. Like, I did cut stuff. It's not like I just threw everything that I had written into the manuscript. But yeah, I think I'm biased probably, but I think it hangs together.
No, it definitely does, like the way you juxtapose like these very heavy topics and the lighter topics, and it sort of does create this quilt. But I just wonder if there was I always try to get to the magic behind how books come together.
It's not
But,
magic.
yeah, there's always a part that's unknown, is what I'm hearing. Okay, Andrew, I'm gonna pivot over to you. So we talked on the podcast about Flash and how, in God's name, you wrote 34 short stories. So tell us, how do you do it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that was just the utility of like a constraint for a period of time where it was just like, oh, I'm writing and I have to end at 1,000 words roughly. So whether I get to 1,200, I got to go back to 1,000. If I get to 800, I'm gonna like put a couple hundred more words in there. I'm not necessarily doing that now, but yeah. For a while it was like, yeah. I mean, I think it was like I said, it was useful to have that constraint. And to write in that shorter form. And then I always tell people it's like you get like a lot of at-bats of like stories, or like how do I end stories, like how do I like bring a reader into it. And when you're writing that form, you get a lot of chances to actually do that. And then I tend to write with like I don't know, like strong emotion and stuff like that. So I think like in a way like a Flash is actually a nice way of doing that, because if you're not say as good at like plotting and stuff like that, which I'm not. It's nice because you can just be like, okay, like story's over, you have an emotional resonant, moment, like we're good here, and then get off the page.
Yeah, totally. And I've heard from, I'm not a fiction writer, I'm nonfiction, but I've heard that selling a short story collection is probably one of the hardest things, maybe aside from selling a poetry collection. So can you tell us about your experience shopping it around and how you kind of landed on your indie press?
Yeah, I did not try to shop it around for one. I entered like university presses have contests, which, I mean, over drinks we could talk about the utility of them and cost, but anyway, I entered them and I won one, so that kind of like took it away from me, where it was just like, okay, great, I won, the book works. I mean, like Jen, but I would say I did just actually throw everything in there. I was like, these are stories that have been published, and I put the good one in the front and the good one at the back. That was my organizing principle for the book. But it was written over 13 years, and I went from being like, like fairly newly married at the beginning of the stories to like, having children, going through divorce. It's like a lot happens over the course of 13 years in your life, and that is reflected in your work. So I'm gonna, borrow from Jen and be like, yeah, I'm the through line. Cool. Yeah, so that to me, I know that it is. I wish that, and probably that's another step, and I can talk to people in this room about how one goes about like shopping short stories. The rumor is you just say, I have a novel, and they take your short stories and they but I don't write novels, so like, I don't know. Let's talk.
I'm gonna pick on you for one more second. how did you keep track of all of your characters? Like, what was the relationship you built with them, and who did you want the publishers, like, were you rooting for one of them to be like, this is the person that the publishers are gonna love?
Oh, I mean, I like fairly, I'm just like, yeah, if you love that story, I'm like, great, I'm glad you like attached yourself to that. I'm like, it's my favorite too. I mean, privately, like, yeah, I'm not sure about it. I'm just, grossly utilitarian here.
I love it, honest. All right, well, for folks in the audience who may be in the position of looking to, move to the next stage with their own writing, what might you tell them about the pros and cons of working with an indie publisher? Any of you can jump in, maybe Dan.
Sure.
Or any of you.
I can start us off. I think what you get with a small press publisher is a lot of one-on-one attention and collaboration. You often have input into the cover and the layout, and they give you real editorial feedback, which for some reason I've heard at university presses and major presses you often don't get that feedback. Sometimes you've gotten it through an agent if you're writing a novel before that, but once it's accepted, sometimes they're like, great, we're gonna slap a cover on it and send it out. In the small press world, it's slower, and there's often, it's one or a handful of people working at this press, so their lives change and your publication schedule gets thrown off, and it can get messy like that. But if you want to have a hand in determining what your book is like and what that life is going to be like, that's a great way to go.
So for us control freaks out there.
Yeah, I mean,
He's like, no, Courtney.
so for me personally, I really want the book to look good, because I'm going to be the one sitting up here for a couple of years talking about it, right? And so there's prestigious presses you can send to, but their books look kind of bad. So I didn't want that, so I was pretty picky. So I don't know if that's like a control freak thing, but I think you got to decide what's important to you. If you want a huge marketing push, you're not going to get that at a small press.
Except you
So-
will.
That's true. We're the interlude.
Correct. Jen, how about you?
I'm gonna second what Dan said in terms of creative control. I pretty much designed the cover. Like, I picked the artist, we flipped the art around, I picked the font, I got the blurbs. It was stressful, but it was nice. It felt really good. Like, I got suggestions on how to structure it. I ignored them. So that part was really, I felt very taken care of. And that meant a lot to me.
Yeah, I don't have experience with this, but I'm getting a sense that, especially with some of the smaller presses, that it's a contest thing, or like the DC Poet Project, they really are looking for someone who they can just take by the hand and say, we're doing this for you. Andrew, maybe you have something to add to that.
So Dan, when you say editorial feedback, you mean like change this poem, change that poem? Wait, sorry. Just curious, because we're talking University Press, yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I have never had the experience of being like, change this poem or cut this poem. It's always suggestions and questions, like, well, what do you think this poem is doing in this connection? Or like, one note I got was several poems in a row were kind of about the same thing, and my editor was like, maybe throw in a fish and see what happens. But, you take that and you go back to the poems and you look at it, and you as the artist are in charge of how this is going to go. So you make a decision. Do I want to fish in that poem or not?
Yeah.
So, but I've never had the experience of like, cut this or,
Sure.
severe
Yeah.
changes.
Yeah, no, I just didn't actually realize, because I was like, because I was University Press, and I was like, I didn't really get like a lot. I mean, I got like to do the cover, like that part was cool. They were like, I don't care about fonts and everybody else does. I was like, fine, whatever font is for you. But like, it's just not my thing. But yeah, I did not get a ton of feedback. It was more like edits on stories than, you know, as opposed to, I don't even want to start with the publicity part, but I guess like, I didn't mind that because I was like tired of those stories too. But they're great, you should obviously buy the book, but like, you know, I had them for years. But the publicity part, I think, was the part that I'm like, oh, I guess you have to like build that up. And like, you know, I mean, I like I said, I wasn't that involved for a while with the community, and I think, you know, this has obviously, you know, truthfully been really helpful for like building that. So I really appreciate the inner loop because I think that's a big part of it. And I just was like my mom's book club is reading my book, and that's cool. But like, you know, so we sold some copies there. But yeah, I mean, it's yeah, who wants to read your book and why is like a question to also ask. I think after you get that like I just did not even think about. I was like, cool, I have a book, you know, and then oh, there's a lot of other stuff.
Yeah, I was thinking about that because we talked about how the writing community helped you sort of get back to writing or keep writing. And so I'm wondering, how did that develop after you had the book? You know, what is your relationship to the writing community now? And Jen, do you want to speak to that first?
Yeah. I'm so grateful. I'm sorry, you guys, I'm such a sap. I feel so fortunate to be here. And the friends that I have made in the community here are deeply important to me and really spur my writing along. I mean, Zach is here. I'll pick on Zach. Another author's corner author. I remember one of the first times we hung out, I said something and he's like, you need to write that story. And I went home and just wrote it.
Nice.
I don't know if it would go anywhere, but just having that kind of loop of feedback and creativity. It's like
An inner loop?
Like an inner loop. If you will, first one's free. So yeah, I'll stop. I'll hand over.
Yeah, it's scary when you have a book come out and you're like, nobody is gonna care about this, but it's so encouraging when you have friends who, you know, you've met over the years who run to cool things like this and ask you to be a part of it. And they're the people who really are like deep in your work. You know, they've heard you read, they've seen things develop. Maybe you've shared work with them before it gets published. So that kind of like building up of yourself as a writer and also yourself as a person, just who can believe that this is something you can do and people will care and people will read it, is makes it all worthwhile, I think. So yeah, it's same as Jen. I mean, the Inner Loop Author's Corner is astounding in how well it supports a writer. You've thought of every single thing that someone could ask for like, can you help me do this? Can you help me do that? And you guys are just like, sure, here you go. It's amazing.
Yeah, I'm more likely to buy other people's books now. Yeah, because I have like a book of my own, and then yeah, I mean, I think I don't know. I mean, for me, it's like, yeah, in a way, it's just like meeting other people who write, and like I'm probably more apt to like get a drink with you than talk about writing all the time. But like, you know, that's cool. Yeah, I'll buy your book afterward. You know, like, so yeah, I think it has probably changed, you know, my relationship. You know, mainly to other writers, not as much to myself. Like, but like, yeah, to other writers and appreciating, you know, their craft and their books. You know, being more likely to, you know, to chat about it, send somebody a message or something like that. You know, I loved your book, I loved your writing, or something like that. You know, I think it just opens that door for me, like a little bit more.
Yeah, I've had that experience only with like articles, but if someone sends a note, I'm like, oh, that's a nice, I should do that thing. I should tell people when I read something and it means something to me. Jen, I'm gonna put you on the spot for a second. When we were mingling a little bit, someone introduced themselves to her, and I think Jessie back there said, hi, I'm Jessie, and Jen said, oh, I'm Jen, and Jessie said, I know. So that was like a great comment of that, coming to know each other. We've gushed a little bit about the things we love about our community here and literary citizenship and that kind of thing. Is there something, people go to LA, people go to Chicago, people go to New York. Is there something in DC that you wish were different about the literary community?
No pressure.
No.
Does anyone have anything sharp? No. I can't think of it. I can't think of anything. I love how down to earth the community is here. I feel like the people that I meet are way more interested in connecting and just in writing than they are in posing. And I think I know that totally is the opposite of what she asked. Maybe Dan will do better. Take two.
So is there anything I want more of? I think it's an interesting time, this sort of like quasi post-pandemic-y figuring out what's gonna happen next time, because a lot of things went away and a lot of people stopped running the reading series they were running, or they, moved and things have changed. So I feel like there's really some openings for new folks to step into new roles and really create something unexpected and open up new voices that we haven't heard before. So I'm excited for that. One thing I'd like to see, and I sort of tried this several years ago, I hosted a couple events called the DC Indie Lit City Summit or something like that. And it was basically trying to bring together all of the different groups in DC who were hosting readings or publishing magazines. And we could talk about exactly that question, like what can we do all together that we couldn't do alone? So we hosted some bigger events and we tried to like work out scheduling because people kept scheduling readings at the same time and stuff, but it sort of lost steam after a while. But I feel like the more connected each different node of our network is, like the stronger we'll be. And I think it's awesome that we have so many different types of things happening. So if we can cross-promote and talk about what other people are doing, that's awesome.
Yeah, that actually sounds really close to what I was thinking. Because I was thinking about like the Potter's House, I was thinking about like Lost City Books, I was thinking about obviously Politics Prose, the Inner Loop. It's like, yeah, there's all these things that are happening, and then I don't always have the sense. I mean, you guys are doing a great job right now, like with like how do y'all can like fit together into like a DC lit scene, and maybe it's just that like I'm not all that in it because of the kids thing, so like I usually only free on like Tuesday nights, and thank God you guys do Tuesday nights, so I can come. But like, I'm like, yeah, maybe, it does feel to me like there's a lot happening, but like, yeah, it's nice to see, some of those coming together. I mean, that was my feeling too, but yeah, it's great, but yeah, there could be a little more connectivity, I don't know.
I think we should open it up to the audience for any questions that they have.
I'm not shy, I'm gonna go first. I would like to know what you all are working on next. What's your next project?
You can hold that one.
I guess I'll go first since I'm holding this mic. So I am working on a new collection of poetry that is sort of about time and desire, I guess. So, I don't know.
Time and desire.
Time and desire, yeah. That's what I'm telling myself anyway.
As the sands for the hourglass fall.
You're good.
I've also been interested in writing like comic scripts and graphic novel type stuff, so that's been a big change and a lot to learn, but a lot of fun at the same time, so I'm kind of stretching in that direction.
I'm producing my first short film in 2.5 weeks. It is so amazing that I got here. Reasonably on time.
Heard it here first.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah. I signed, well, actually, Barrelhouse accepted my proposal, so I have like 30,000 words to write in December for an extension of an essay into a chapbook, so, you know, hopefully it works. Yeah, so that's happening in December. Yeah.
Okay, so I've noticed that a lot of writers these days tend to teach or edit, and I'm curious as to how you balance your day job with writing new work or getting published, because I think that it takes a lot of time and mental effort. So I'm just curious as to how you balance your day jobs with writing.
I do not. I teach, and I have 5 classes, so I don't write at all for a few months when I'm teaching, and then I try to do summer and December, but I don't really write during the semester. Yeah.
Yeah, my day job is communications for nonprofit organizations, so it is writing, but it's not necessarily the same type of writing I do in my free time. And I think I've worked lots of literary jobs before, and at the end of the day from those, thinking about poems all day, I was pretty wiped out. So thinking about writing but not doing it in a creative way helps me sort of keep my brain on language, but do reserve my, I won't say my best stuff, that seems bad, but, you know, reserve what I'm most interested in. There's no way for me to save this, I guess. I reserve my creative energies for my own projects, I guess. Sorry, bosses and clients.
I'm a big believer at, like, this is another way that community is awesome. I have writing dates every Saturday and Sunday morning with my friend Idle on Zoom in Toronto, and we sit down and we write together.
I'm just curious, Jen, about your short film. Can you tell us a little bit more about film?
Yeah, I'll slip you a 20 when we're done. Let's see, can Jen remember the log line? This is a fun quiz. When an anxious teenager gets caught trying to sneak out, she risks a rift with her family to reveal her biggest secret. So it's a trans coming out story, and it's going to be directed and starring both Black trans women, which I'm really excited for. And it is, someone called it wholesome and also subversive, which I think is, I'm feeling that. Yes, it's wholesomely subversive. Or subversively wholesome. Thank you so much for asking.
I'm gonna pick on Jeff again, sorry. So I was obviously really interested in what you said about, you know, starting out with screenwriting, and very happy to hear that you have a film coming out. How did you get into screenwriting in the first place?
My kid brother, who's not a kid and has 3 children of his own, but he's always my kid brother, is in post-production. He lives in LA. And he had an idea for a feature, and since he's an excellent storyteller, but not a writer. And he wanted to partner up then so that I could handle the dialogue and the character, you know, development, and he could handle the broad strokes. It's actually been really good. The short is my own though, yeah. So that's just sort of how it. And I think, okay, nobody asked. I'm gonna say that. I think more poets need to write screenplays, because the way that we condense language, just not that one, not that one. That's terrifying. The way we condense language is really excellent preparation for, and the way that we sort of imply meaning instead of stating it outright. Both of those things are so helpful in writing screenplays. So I would say, give it a go.
A question for the about small presses. I mean, can you speak a little bit about you talk about the joys of being in control, but can you talk a little bit about the economics of it? And I mean, I assume you're not getting an advance or anything, but maybe you are. I mean, can you talk about that and then how the books are distributed and whether you're seeing any? I mean, I don't need to know how much money you're making.
Or spending.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think something we should talk about openly because you're going to work on this book for years and years and years, and at the end, you maybe will get paid $500 to $1,000 for the manuscript, for poetry at least. And different presses do it different ways. I mean, royalties tend to be nothing, so a lot of places just pay like a fee up front, and that's it. In terms of distribution, different presses do it differently. There's a company called Small Press Distribution that distributes a lot of small presses, but in my experience, they tend to have trouble getting those books into actual bookstores. They do a little better with libraries. Ingram is the biggest book distributor, and some small presses are available through Ingram, some aren't. Ingram's actually expanding its small press program, so hopefully more small presses join up there. So as an author, distribution is a huge thing you should think about, because if you are doing events and the bookstore can't get your books and you show up and you're like, hey, I'm here to sell my book, and they're like, oh, we don't have the books, that's a bad situation, right? And oftentimes you end up, selling them yourself out of your bag or whatever. And yeah. But you just kind of do what you got to do, I guess. It's not a money-making system. Even, the folks who you may think are making money because maybe they got a review in the New York Times or something, they're probably not making money. They're teaching or doing something else to make money. So that's just the reality of it. Like, the big money is not there, especially at the small press level. You guys want to share?
Yeah, no, I mean, I got like $1,000 for winning the prize, and that's like against like the first, I don't look close to the contract, a few hundred book sales, right? So it's like, am I ever gonna make that? I don't know, right? So that's what I got out of it. Distribution was fine. It's University of Arkansas Press. There were a couple of moments where I ran into that kind of similar thing of like, well, like this event is in like 2 days, and then so like my editor there is like, I talked to him like, hey, like can we get books like to the place? So yeah, I mean, it matters. Yeah, distribution matters. Certainly, yeah, it's a separate conversation about the lack of support for artistic ecosystems. So yeah, it's certainly not a way, as I said, to make money, but that feels somewhat intentional in our society here.
I think that's part of why all of us wanted a book that we liked looking at. Because we're the ones that are going to be looking at it.
Hi, I'm just wondering how you have stayed motivated through periods of rejection and self-doubt.
No pressure.
Yeah,
I'm going to go back to, I'm just going to harp on community the whole time. I think being very cautious about who you share your work with is important, and at what stage. I've been in so many workshops for so many years, and I think that's what contributed to my writer's block, right? I think most of what we need during the early stages of creation is support, not even helpful suggestions. And so I think being really intentional about the audience that you share your work with, and the stage at which your writing is when you do really helps. I think the other thing is just staying connected. I mean, if you spend time with writers, you realize like your question is it's gonna resonate with everybody, because we are all there all the time. Like, if we're submitting, we're getting rejections. So, and it's just helpful when people share their rejections. So that I appreciate that vulnerability in other writers. I'll stop now.
I think the other thing that kind of gives me solace sometimes is that it's all a very long process. Like, it takes a long time to write the work, it takes a long time to find a publisher, it takes a long time for that book to come out, you then spend a long time trying to promote that book. Like, so you go through periods where there's lots of excitement and everything's great, and then you go through long periods where, you know, nothing seems to be working. And I think if you go through those cycles enough, you start to realize it's a cycle, and you're like, all right, I'm just gonna keep going, and eventually I'll get back to the good part, and that's kind of the best you can do. There's no like secret, I don't think, about how to keep yourself motivated and be a successful writer. I think you just decide, I'm gonna be a writer, and however this goes, that's what I'm gonna do.
And you have to have a high pain threshold.
Yeah, it's just like, I don't know, yeah, it's just like, I just kind of grind at it. I just like, you know, I try not to think about it, you know, it's like, file those rejections away and move on with the day, and not get, I don't know, yeah, it's like, I don't even get involved in it. It's like, I stay in my box for like 2 seconds, and I update my spreadsheet, and I like move along. And then I guess with writing with Jenn, it's like, I don't actually take like a ton of feedback, which is like controversial to my friend group, I guess. But like, part of it is that I went through an MFA program, and I took it for 3 years, and I listened to it really closely, and I paid attention. And like, now, like, you know, there are probably imperfections about that, but like, I think, because actually, yeah, when I get a lot of feedback, I'm like, shit, is this any good? Like, what am I doing? You know? So I don't seek it out as much. But I mean, for other people, I think it works well. But for me, it's like personal protection. Yeah.
I would also add, I'm a writer too, guys. I mean, we're rejected in so many ways every day. I'd rather it be for something that I love doing. Maybe. At least I get something out of the first half of it, right?
I mean, I enjoy writing. I mean, right? Yeah. I mean, so like, I mean, that's the other answer, right? It's like, I like when I write. Yeah. And all the other stuff is like, you know, I'm not like perfect, but like all the other stuff is like, it's like an add-on. Yeah. Like, I like writing. Yeah.
Yes, during the editing process, you know, I think, Andrew, you mentioned you don't take a lot of necessarily feedback, but how do you all deal with, like, I guess, you know, over or analysis paralysis during the editing process when you're working on a piece or you're working on a book?
Silence.
I don't know, I think you're the one who gets to decide how your art turns out, is sort of just a general principle I live by, because, you know, the things that are the strangest and like craziest ideas you have are the most fun ideas for you, right? And other people probably aren't gonna understand what you're trying to do at first, that's okay. Neil Gaiman talks about, like, when people give you feedback, they're most often giving you the wrong solution to the issue. But where they're pointing at and saying, like, this is where I got lost, or, you know, this part feels funny to me, they're right, because they are your audience, right? So then it's your responsibility to be like, okay, something here isn't working. It's not what that guy suggested, but I should try to, like, dig in and see. And I think the same with rejection. Like, if you send a piece out a bunch of times, it gets rejected a bunch of times, you go back and look at it and be like, I don't know, is something not working here? Is there something I can do better? So I think you take it, but you don't necessarily listen to it. You just kind of like recognize there might be an issue and that you might have some work to do.
I completely went blank. Like, I had thoughts and they're gone now.
Is that paralysis?
Come back.
Well, I mean, for me, it's like 2 ways, right? Like, for my own writing, it's like, right, a lot of my writing comes from my subconscious mind, and I just trust it, and I just, like, you know, so I line edit, and I might move some stuff around, but, like, because it's coming from my subconscious mind and on my analytic stuff, like, that's that's what happens for me, and I get intensely involved in it for like 2 weeks, and then I'm like just done with it. I'm like, I'm like, that's it for me. Like my brain, like I spend this energy. What's weird is that like I teach, and like when I'm looking at other people's writing though, I'll be like, hey, it's like this is what you need to fix. Like, it's like really, I mean, they're student writers, right? They're new. I'm not talking like other, but like it's like this is what you need to fix. And then I'll look at my own writing and I'm like, I didn't use a declarative sentence like I just told them to do. But like, so I mean, there's a hypocrisy too in it. But yeah, I mean, other people's writing is really sometimes easy, particularly newer writers, to see, and it's I don't know, it's more difficult to see through.
I'm back. I think time is really important for me, like, and letting some time elapse between the first draft and the editing process is just an absolute lifesaver for me. Because if I try and edit all at once and write after I write something, I don't think I do my best editing work then, right? So I feel like it's important for me, I'm not gonna tell you what to do, but for me it's important for me to give myself permission to A, take some time, and B, dip into it just a little bit from time to time too, instead of thinking I've gotta edit this whole 120-page screenplay.
So I think we have time for one more question from the audience, if there is one.
This is a lovely event, by the way. Thank you, Politics Prose and Interloop. And this is about the local DC community. I'm just curious about the greater community, like the world community, and Twitter in particular, because I'm finding that that's a place where writers are congregating, internationally, and there's a support system that's grown on Twitter that's really seems to be a powerful thing. I'm just curious if, I know that Andrew uses it because that's where I discovered Andrew, but how about to you guys? Any involvement in Twitter there?
Pre or post Elon?
It doesn't matter, either way.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at @DanBrady82 if you want to follow me. But I don't know, I used to be on Twitter a lot more. I haven't been in recent years, partially just, life stuff. I've got young kids and I'm not like on the scene in the same way I used to be. And it can be very helpful, Twitter. I think you can find lots of people. It's great to connect, but it can also be its own kind of like echo chamber, and there's something about meeting people in the real world too. Like, I'm looking around this room and I'm seeing all these people that I've worked with on events and readings and things across the years, and I've never had a connection like that through social media. So I think it's a good place to start and sort of investigate and find out who you might be interested in, but I'd still encourage like the in-person stuff or Zoom-based stuff is, you're gonna get a much deeper connection there.
Yeah, I mean, I basically agree. Yeah, I think in person is just so much more valuable. And the people who I've met, in the last year and a half, paying attention to it, just like have influenced my writing a lot more. Even though, again, there's utility, you can get people to read, you can see like submission calls. We can get a drink and talk about that, like our submissions about. But like, yeah, I mean, it is what it is. It's a place to go sometimes to find more readers. But I have some skepticism about it as well.
I'm in the weird position now of defending Twitter. I think it's good for feeling less alone sometimes, and that's super important to me. Talking about sort of finding that community and realizing that we all face rejection, that we all have moments of creative resistance and blocks and fallow periods, and I feel like people tweet about that stuff all the time, and it makes me feel so much better. So yes, I would not think it's in any way a substitute for what for what these guys are talking about. But I think it has a place. It's like chutney.
And with that.
Thanks for joining us in the Author's Corner. For more conversations with DC area authors and to stay updated about the latest from small independent presses, subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook at The Inner Loop DC and on Twitter and Instagram at The Inner Loop Lit.